Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and that's where we pick from each week. I think there's like 22 or something written down from this past week. So you guys continue to ask great questions. I know it's cold for a lot of folks watching this right now. We are actually down in, I'm on Cudjoe Key at the end of Blimp Road, if you know where that is, right beside Sugarloaf Key. Interesting little boat ramp that's at the end of Blimp Road. There's mangrove behind me, and you can see the edge of the water over here next to me. It's about 67 or something like that. It only ranges from about 67 to 71. It has been raining on and off since we've been here, but I think it was 15 degrees in Raleigh this morning. We've protected nothing at the house, by the way, because I actually want to do this channel in such a way that the garden isn't always perfect. So there's nothing covered, there's nothing protected. Obviously house plants are inside, and tropicals are protected, but nothing that I've called marginal in my area is protected at the house. So you guys will get what looks good and what doesn't, from our garden. I don't want to have a channel that's like based on, having covered everything all the time and protected everything and have some sort of expectation that's outside of reality. So hopefully when we get home, it's like, what if it gets damaged? And then I'm like, well, it'll be some sort of content for the channel to show you that it, something got damaged and what temperature, that it got damaged at. Okay, there are still, again, there are tickets over on the website, the HortTube.com website. In our shop, if you go to HortTube.com, up at the top it says shop. That's where the t-shirts are, and also the tickets for the open garden, which is June 20th and 21st, Friday evening, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. You can choose from one of those three. If you're local, please pick Friday evening if you can, because that's been the least sold, and some of you did this past week when I said that. So thank you very much for responding to that request, because again, that was the filling up the least quickly, and I know some traveling folks will want to have Saturday. There's going to be a list of, I'll put it up on next week's question and answer video when we're back home. I'll put up a list of hotels and restaurants and other things that if you're traveling to come, you can figure out those accommodations sooner than later. It's of course much less expensive to plan travel way out in advance, of course, than it is a week before. Let's see, and the weekly garden planner, I'll have February up before you see next Sunday's question and answer. Sorry I haven't gotten to that yet, but it is shot and everything's ready to go, and I've created the pages and all that kind of stuff. I just got to get the videos uploaded and some descriptions of the videos written. I'll get that done this week, and then we're jumping in with some additional content for March, April, May, already working on that to expand the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series. Discounts are linked down below this video if you're interested in those. Okay, one thing before I jump into the a couple things before I jump into the first questions here. One is a lot of the questions, not a lot, but some of the questions are about, frequently are about why did this plant die, kind of questions, and those are really hard to answer from just picking them. So if I don't pick your why did this plant die repeatedly question, it's because I don't know, without having been there and, seeing what the conditions were, know what area you're in, know what kind of microclimate, literally, at my nursery, I had one spot where we parked vehicles intentionally because it was always frequently 2 to 3 degrees colder than anywhere else in the nursery. It was frost on the windows in that spot every single morning, but it was better than parking plants there because the plants would have been exposed to 2 or 3 degrees colder every morning. It's just a little pocket, in the nursery. So that's what makes these, I don't know if it's wet, dry, seasonally wet, anything about the space that it's in. So I have a hard time answering those why did it die questions. That's why I don't pick those. So don't be offended by it. It's just, it would just be me standing here in front of a camera guessing. And then there'll be a lot of seed starting videos this spring. Hoping to jump right into that when we get back to the house, because there were a ton of questions on the 5-minute Friday seeding video from, I guess that one was 2 weeks ago as you're watching this at this point. Okay, let me see. Jumping into actual gardening questions from last week. Somebody had just thrown out that new plant introductions are just constant. They see constant videos for new plants, new plants, new plants, new plants. And then it seems like they're pulled just as fast from the markets. And it says, are sales the only metric that determine if a plant remains on the market? Pretty much. I mean, specialty nurseries are more likely to dive into something that's interesting to them or interesting to a small group of people that they sell plants to. You know, the question is, you know, if you have a 50 acre, there's this really uncomfortable size in the nursery business, okay? And I'll explain this, where you can be this ultra specialty nursery, or some sort of drop shipping nursery where you're bringing in plants and then sending those through mail order. You know, there's a bunch of those where it's basically a business that's just a bunch of nurseries they buy from a bunch of nurseries and then represent it as their nursery and then send those things out, or they grow the plants and send them out. Those specialty nurseries, in a lot of cases, can find a niche and survive pretty well over time. It can be a bit exhausting because that was the size of my nursery, and you know, if you're at a certain scale, when you're really, really small, you can't necessarily hire help, which means you're 7 days a week at that nursery. These 13-degree nights are stressful. Hail is stressful. Thunderstorms are stressful. Heavy rains are stressful. No rain is stressful. You know, like a lot can be built into that. And then there's the 300 acre to thousands of acre nurseries, you know, across the country that grow for large garden centers, landscape supply yards, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, you know, that whole, you know, group of box stores. And those are, you know, those two extremes. There's a middle group in there that's really hard. You know, the 50 acre nursery that's selling to garden centers, and a lot of them are knocking on the same garden center doors. There's a lot of competition in that little range in there. Also a range where you tend to have very small staffs and you're working extremely hard. And I don't know where I was going with all that, but the thing with you have to be able to sell the plants you grow. That's at the end of the day. There are a lot of new and interesting things. Building a market for those things takes time. As an example, I started growing, frost-proof gardenias. I had some of the, you know, first frost-proof gardenias, and I was riding around getting nurseries. You know, I had them in gallon containers, thousands and thousands of them, because I had seen it, knew it was going to be a great plant, was growing thousands and thousands of them. It was an easy plant to sell because it didn't replace something. They knew gardenias. They could see this thing in a container. It was a perfect round ball. It was an easy decision for every nursery I took it to. Shindo viburnum comes along, and I figured out how to root them. They're not the easiest thing to root. They're not the easiest thing to grow. They're not the easiest thing to get started. Once they are started, they're very easy. But getting them started was not easy. So I figured go through this whole process of growing hundreds and hundreds of trade gallon Shindo viburnum, and I take them around, and no nurseryman wants them because they don't look particularly good in a gallon pot. And, you know, I kind of abandoned it. Some of the people that I was selling them to kind of abandoned it. And then 5 years later, every plan everywhere, every landscape plan in the city of Raleigh, every landscaper is putting in Shindo viburnum as fast as they can. And basically you could have a nursery now based on something like Shindo viburnum or green giant arborvitae, where it takes time to build that audience. So you can come out and pull the trigger on something and say, look at this new thing and look how great it's going to be. It may take 5 years, 6 years to actually convince magazines and landscape designers and others to grow it, or spec it, you know, on plans, and then nurseries then have to retool it, get excited about it again, and go through that whole process. So there's, you know, yes, the metric is sales. At the end of the day, but the sales can be weird. The 20-year patent, I've said for a while, you know, the 20-year patents make a lot of sense on, you know, I rode a bicycle over here this morning, and if I came up with a new way to do something on that bicycle and I patented it, I could start making that thing tomorrow really quickly and start selling it immediately. In the plant business, we have 20-year patents. From the time you sell the first one, it kind of engages that patent. Sometimes it's 5, 6, 7, 8 years of the patent gone before people are excited about it and want it and are adding it to their gardens. You know, so there's only a little bit of time left on the patent. It's an interesting. I've thought for a long time that the patents on plants should be longer, just because it takes. You're moving a very slow moving ship, you know, and it takes 3 and 4 years to grow something. You know, sometimes. Okay. And then the other thing they had thrown in, and we're on question 1. That's kind of, we're going to have to speed this thing up, right? The other thing that they said is they only see like dwarf plants coming, and that's true too. Got a big old bird flying over my head here. With houses being on slab, as you look, and I have conversations with plant breeders, and you know, I was lucky enough to sit with Dr. Durr and Buddy Lee at a one evening last week, and we're talking about new plants, talking about plant introductions. The plants, in order to meet those cells numbers that we're talking about, the thresholds, it has to be something that people are already familiar with. You know, we didn't have to reinvent selling azaleas to sell people reblooming azaleas, right? You didn't have to reinvent, I don't have to reinvent boxwoods, to say that a disease-resistant boxwood is something you should buy if you're buying boxwoods. You don't have to tell people that a hydrangea that blooms longer than other hydrangeas is exciting, because they already buy hydrangeas. Same thing with the gardenia I was talking about. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel to get people on that. And then the other thing is, with houses on slab, windows are lower on the houses, a lot of the houses that are going in. So people are looking for little well-behaved meatballs. And so shrinking the plants. And so not a lot of attention is paid to a plant that gets rangy and 20 feet tall. Some people may want that rangy 20-foot tall plant as a screen, as a backdrop, as something in a shady area. That's not the thing that most plant breeders are looking for. They're looking to take that rangy 20-foot tall plant and turn it into a 4-foot perfect mounded ball, because that's the thing on a table at a garden center that sells. And so sells, yes, to answer your question. Let's see. So somebody said the best grass for their small backyard in zone 8A, central North Carolina, with at least 6 hours of sun and a golden retriever. I guess you're going to end up with one of the warm season grasses. I would overall discourage Bermuda, although it's the most resilient to your golden retriever and and your foot traffic, and it's why golf course greenways, in the South are Bermuda grass. So you make that decision. I do like zoysia. I do like centipede. So for me, as a person who is not trying to spray and not trying to have a self-repairing turf that requires the least amount of inputs, centipede is overall the best one for that. It just doesn't require, if you look at a centipede fertilizer, it's very low on, doesn't really need very much fertilizer in order to do its thing. So from an environmental standpoint, centipede. From what is the fastest self-repairing grass? Bermuda. No question about that. But again, I've made a video on Bermuda may be the worst weed for our gardens. So keep that in mind. And then the other thing is, we're going to have lawn related material on the weekly garden planner going forward. So if those of you who have the weekly garden planner or considering the weekly garden planner, there will be lawn information as well. And I did lawn care for several years with a company years ago, and I sold lawn care. Literally, I started I had a job at a True Value hardware store when I was 14 and a half, and I could get my work permit, learning selling lawn things, that selling Scott's fertilizer, turf builder, and chemicals for lawns then. So I've got a lot of experience with turf over the years. I've just never talked about it much on this channel because it's not my personal passion, but it will be in the weekly garden planner. Okay. So somebody has access to wild yaupon for free and they want to hedge with it. Thoughts? Is it the same as the cultivated hollies? No, it's not going to be the same. And when Steph and I so we'll see inkberry hollies in South Florida. Don't really see them down here on the Keys, mostly because it's mostly lower salt. It's probably salt, that's causing it. But when we get up above Homestead and we're anywhere up there, we'll see large groves of inkberry hollies, occasionally see yaupon. They tend to be suckering and they'll take a big chunk of area over. And so there's a lot of seedling diversity in it. And so when you're talking about taking cuttings on a wild stand, you would definitely want to identify the plants within that stand that seem to be the fullest, most compact, that kind of thing. So again, these are in the wild, this is all seedling stuff. And to our eyes, it looks the same, but there's going to be a lot of diversity within the seedling group. okay? It helps build diversity out here in, in this space. And so again, it may look like this one's identical to that one, but it's not. It's slight differences, because they're seedlings. It's because, humans, with different parents, we all look slightly different with similar kind of thing there, right? It's just hard for us as humans to look at this plant and see what the difference is, but there are differences. And some of those differences will be its ability to be more salt tolerant. These mangroves, they consolidate. Nothing can actually grow in salt water really at the end of the day, but these have developed a way to put all of their salt into just a few leaves and then drop those leaves on the ground. This is how this plant is getting rid of the excess salt that it's picking up from being in the salt water right there. So it's it's an interesting, so the plant that did that better, gets to survive longer. So this just, again, it's all seedling diversity. It's a slow evolution of things out here to perfect being able to sit there in that water and grow. When people are making selections for taking a wild plant and turning it into a well-behaved ornamental plant, they're looking for ones that don't sucker, that are compact, that are going to require the least amount of maintenance. And so your wild stand, look at how it's behaved. And then yes, take cuttings from those, because that would be a selection of a wild Yaupon holly that you've selected because it's more compact. It looks like it's going to do what you're going to do. You're going to need an upright one, right? Because you're trying to screen. So select for it. It'll be just like other plant breeders did. Okay. So somebody else, then the next one is a dwarf Yaupon question. Somebody's dwarf Yaupons are no longer dwarf. We showed in a video in the neighborhood 7-foot tall dwarf Yaupon holly hedge that, on any tag, it's going to say 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet, but they're 7 feet and they're being pruned. So I don't know how tall they would have been without pruning. How hard can they cut them? You can cut them in half or more without any problem. Coming out of winter would be the time to do that. I've said multiple times recently, though, keep in mind when you hard prune old plants, they will come back faster than they originally grew. So you're going to have to determine whether this process of having to reset them more and more and more frequently is worth doing. Okay, somebody bought a neglected landscape with 12-foot tall azaleas. So this is another one about hard pruning. They have very few interior leaves, thick branching at the base. In Alabama, can they rejuvenate, prune them, and how far back can you cut them? So if you wanted to enjoy the flowers this season, you absolutely could. Your 8A Alabama probably going to bloom beginning of April, depending on the variety. Obviously, they're probably southern indicas there's probably indica azaleas if they're 12 feet tall. The bigger leaves, bigger flowers. You can enjoy them flowering this spring if you even enjoy them flowering. And then after they flower, you can cut them hard, or you can do it before if you don't care. But you can cut those things basically to the ground. You can cut them in half or lower, whatever you feel comfortable with. While you're down there, what you're going to see on old azaleas like this is, although we consider azaleas evergreen, just like this mangrove behind me, it's dropping leaves. So it's dropping leaves down in here constantly. And those leaves have built up in it over time. I mean, where we consider leafy evergreens evergreen, that just means they're drop leaves all the time rather than all at once. And it's almost certainly built up in there. Mulch, other things have blown in there over the years. So while you're down there, I would get them cleaned out, raked out as much as possible. Put down something, you can put some of that back if you want to once you clean it completely out, but just a normal amount of mulch. And then try to get as many of those suckers cut out as you can, because I can tell you also it's going to have suckered over the years. And so cut some of those back down under the ground and then fertilize them with you're in Alabama, your soil's plenty acidic. You don't need to use anything for acid-loving plants. You can just use plant tone, is fine. But that's all you'd have to do. Again, they're going to come back super fast. And so what you're going to do is get into a yearly routine of, after they flower in the spring, hedging them back about as far as they grow each season. So if they grow in 3 feet a year, which they probably are with that kind of root system, every year after they flower, you're going to want to cut them back about 3 feet. This person's in Aberdeen, North Carolina, with an 1.5 acres of untouched sand. So down in eastern North Carolina, just to the east of us in Raleigh, with the fall line for the eastern part of North America. You can Google that and see where the fall line is. And basically from where we are in Raleigh, there's falls on the Neuse River. And then all of a sudden it's deadpan flat from there to the coast, basically. And that's the sand hills, or the sand, it's just sand from there to the coast. This person down in Aberdeen, it is, the main thing we're trying to do with sand is prevent the water from falling through it as fast, right? So that's the issue. So it's really, again, the solution is organic material, whether we're talking about within clay soils, we're talking about getting help from earthworms and other things, keeping them alive, keeping all this life alive seasonally by mulching and keeping it, moderating the soil temperature, moderating the soil moisture. We're able to keep those things alive that help break that clay up for us and get some of that organic material down in it. With sand, we're really just trying to stop that column of water from, dropping through it as fast. So that organic material on the top is just as beneficial. So yes, it's about using leaf mold and compost and wood chips if you can get them, and any of those kinds of things to slow that water falling. Heavy nutrients tend to drop deeper in the soil. So like calcium is 7 times bigger or something like that than, maybe wrong about that, something like that than magnesium. So heavier nutrients, just like when you're gold mining, the gold is sitting on top of the rock at the bottom because it's so heavy, right? It's the same thing with any other mineral, so in sand, those minerals, some of those heavy minerals are going to drop further down in it. And that's what we're trying to prevent. Any addition of nutrients that we're adding through fertilizer or organic material, or the leaves falling off of our plants and trees and those kinds of things, we're trying to prevent those nutrients from dropping through that soil column, especially the heavier nutrients, as fast. And so at the end of the day, it's going to take you a little longer, potentially, to do that. But yes, it's just organic material at the end of the day. And at 1.5 acres, you're gonna need a lot of it. So I would, if you're doing new beds and that kind of thing, and you're not planning on planting them for a while, I would definitely get on the Chip Drop website and see if you can get wood chips to help you with some of that, areas that you're not working on for a little while. So this person uses a seeding media that won't take up moisture. It's either I don't know if it's hydrophobic. Hydrophobic just means it won't actually take on water, period. So like peat moss can become hydrophobic. It's great at holding moisture, but if it ever dries completely out, when you water it, you'll see water just shed off the top of it. It's resisting re-wetting. So you can use a wetting agent for that kind of thing. But this person's is just, their soil's not wicking. Okay, so it won't wick water up from the bottom of the tray. If they were to water from the bottom of the tray, they just have very wet bottom, whatever amount of where the water actually contacted the bottom of the soil media, and nothing up at the top. You can use some sort of wetting agent may help with that. But I think at the end of the day, you can just water from the top. Just figure out an easier way. If this soil mix works for you, whatever it is, whether it's bark and compost or whatever it is, and you're not trying to avoid using peat or coconut coir or whatever, that does wick much easier, then you can just water from the top, and you just have to do it as gently as you possibly can, because you don't want to be washing seed from one cell to another. So the most gentle nozzle that you can use, and go over the top of it. If it is hydrophobic, meaning that water just sits on top of it, that you can add a wetting agent to, which you could get on Amazon or a garden center or whatever near you. Okay, so this person's in southern Delaware, near the beach, they said. So Steph has a sister that lives in Lewis, so we were wondering if you're in Lewis, Delaware, potentially not that far from Rehoboth Beach. This past year was tough, heat, drought. Yes, we went up through there, the whole Northeast, heck, Raleigh, and then going out and up and around Lake Ontario. We went through Delaware and that way up to Connecticut, and then cut around through New York and went around. It's so dry everywhere up there. And then of course we went from no cold during the fall to extreme cold. They just have a lot of plant damage overall. They figure, their hydrangeas have been damaged and other things, and what to expect from this spring. So really it's about trying to, going forward, reduce the stress as much as possible. So again, these are basic things about making sure the place is mulched, and making sure that you're not letting things go in extreme dry periods, this next year. Because once things are under stress, they're going to be more apt to have stress. Be careful not to overwater, because sometimes when plants go into stressful situations, they adapt to it. They'll drop half their leaves, they become half the size, they reduce their roots, and then at that point we tend to panic water and we overwater them. So just be checking if we do go through some sort of dry time this spring, but don't be panic watering. I would definitely fertilize, coming out of winter with some sort of organic fertilizer. Just go through the steps of trying to reduce the stress as much as possible, going forward. Again, we use a lot of annuals in our garden to cover open space between plants to keep the soil cooler during the summertime. Vinca and dwarf zinnias, or dwarf vinca and dwarf zinnias, and a lot of these annual plants are well adapted at really taking a ton of sun and occupying a space in the garden while your plants are able to fill that space in the future. Okay, this person has an 8 by 10 foot trellis in an English garden. They want climbing vines or flowers in 8A Raleigh, so near us. They want pollinators. They have morning to afternoon sun, so all day sun. So, pollinator wise for a vine, you could have, a trumpet honeysuckle, bignonia. Those are natives that you could use. Bignonia is a really good one. What's the variety that we have, Steph?
Tangerine. Beauty?
No, it's the one named after the island.
Oh, Jekyll.
Jekyll Island, the one that Dr. Dwarf found on Jekyll Island. That one's that's a really good bignonia that we have on our fence at the house. Keep in mind, any vine is going to require maintenance in the future. They're going to grow very quickly, and so at some point you're going to be doing some pruning on them. Of course, you could do sweet peas potentially in the cooler parts of the year. They'll pretty much can go in the ground in the fall for us and live through the winter, and then really take off in the spring up until summer. You could grow star jasmine as a non-native evergreen, have fragrant flowers on it. Not as many pollinators are going to be on that, but as some of those native things. And of course, clematis. There are clematis that are some are better than others at being pollinator plants that you can use as well. Be careful not to get like clematis paniculata or sweet autumn clematis, because that one can seed itself into your garden and become kind of a nightmare later on. Okay, although it's all over Raleigh anyway. This person has 9 crepe myrtles on 1.5 acres with bark scale. How can they save their beloved trees? I'll tell you, on the bark scale this year in Raleigh, we've definitely saw less on some trees than we had seen the year before. I see new crepe myrtles we've found that have bark scale on them, but I have not seen any. I got a truck that's just pulled up here in front of us. Reef guys out here looking at the reefs, I guess, some sort of laboratory, doing the good work of protecting these barrier islands out here. It looks like by reading the side of their truck. What was I saying? Okay, the crepe myrtle bark scale. We've seen some crepe myrtles that didn't have it last year that have it this year, but we've walked by some in Raleigh that have less than they had last year. So it seems that there is some ability for a healthy plant to resist this. So keep that in mind. Again, this is going through the process of making sure those spaces are mulched, making sure your lawn's not growing right up to the base of them, just keeping them overall generally healthy. Some pruning, crossing branches out of them, doing the basics of maintenance may go a long way, and having these crepe myrtles be able to resist this bark scale. But this time of year, you can spray them with a dormant oil on the trunks, and you can look this up on, I'm not going to be able to go through this in a question and answer on a Sunday video like this, but you can use dormant oil. We use dormant oil in the nursery for scale related issues. Basically smothers them in an oil. Usually it's some sort of soybean oil or something like that. So it's pretty benign overall in the garden as far as spraying goes, but that's one thing that you can do. Again, if it keeps coming back and it seems to be getting worse and the trees are in decline because of it, then you have to start at some point go, well, what is it that's causing the stress on these plants that allow mine to be more vulnerable than someone else's? Are they not getting enough sun? Are they not getting enough water? Is it, again, grass growing right up to the base of them, weed eaters hitting them, whatever. Okay. too root bound in the space that they're in. Okay. So somebody's planting bushel and berries, assortment of blue, blackberry, and raspberries. Or is there any advantage to growing the berries in raised beds? I don't think so. And I think the most nutrient-dense food is grown in the ground. I've talked about this in the past. Again, folks, there's a lot of reasons to have raised beds. Certainly they're easier to work in. There's less bending over. There's a lot less, you can weed them easier. There's a lot of reasons to have them. But for me, overall, I want to improve the soil that I have so that I can grow the most nutrient-dense food for the least amount of money, because maintaining those raised beds is going to cost money. Putting them in is going to cost money. And then keep in mind that blueberries, blackberries, raspberries require maintenance. They require pruning. They require, they're not just plant and forget plants. Also, they're also all suckering plants, and they're going to sucker much easier probably in a raised bed than they are in the ground. I saw somebody doing figs in a raised bed in our neighborhood on a walk a couple weeks ago, and it had suckered the entire box away, basically. So basically now there's 47 different fig plants that are this tall with one stem, and none of them are ever going to do anything because they're competing against one another. So keep that in mind. I think those runners would go further. But blackberries, raspberries, blueberries require significant winter pruning to actually produce fruit. And so those are things that once you get into the business of growing these things, you'll want to look up how to do it. I would personally do it in improved ground soil and not in a raised bed. Personal. Okay. And then I guess I introduce these videos with most Sundays. I do this question and answer, and I haven't missed one of these videos in many years. And so I guess that this was the next thing. If I ever missed doing a Sunday Q&A, it would have been a long, long time ago, 3 or 4 years probably, since we've actually missed doing one of these. Let's see. I do enjoy doing them. And this is my most basic video. I'm standing here filming it, wrote the questions down, filming it. I'm going to watch it through really quickly, and I'm going to upload it on the thing. And I don't put a lot of words on the screen, and I don't put a lot of stuff into it, because it's enjoyable for me at the level, of more input that we currently have on it. If I went and got photos for every question and all that kind of stuff, it could turn into a day-long editing thing. So I enjoy it like this. Somebody's trying to locate a nightlight Chamaecyparis. Plants by Mail is sold out currently. This would be the time, I think. So if you go back to Friday's video, I did a video on locating plants. This 5-minute video. Again, most of those 5-minute videos are quite long, but this is one of those things. This is a great time of year to be on the hunt for things, because garden centers have been out and about, typically going to trade shows and that kind of thing. They may be more easily able to locate things that they haven't been for the last few years, because inventories are up as well. So this is a good time of year to be on the hunt for something, even if you're not purchasing it in January or February, but you can pre-order it for later. Okay. Somebody was talking about they're trying to plant under oaks that are well established, and they're coming across 3 to 4 inch roots. Can they cut the root out, or should they move the planting hole? I would definitely move the planting hole. And I also look for the smallest possible plants that you can plant in that space. So I grew starter plants for other nurseries and turned that into a retail business at the Raleigh Farmers Market, selling 3-quart. We used to call them gallons, and then they became trade gallons. They're actually 3-quart black pots. They're in every garden center you'll ever go to. But that's the size container that I grew, and I sold them to other nurseries. They potted them into 3 gallons or 5 gallons, 7 gallons, whatever, grew them out, sold them on to their customers at garden centers or whatever. But I made a career selling those things at the farmer's market because so many people had issues like this. They had maybe they're older, or they had super hard clay, hard pan soil, or they had tree roots, or whatever it was that was the reason that they wanted to plant smaller plants, or they just enjoy watching things grow, or they wanted to save money. There's all kinds of reasons to want to hunt down smaller plants. So if you can find 3-quart, even 1-quart plants, 2-quart, 3-quart plants, that would be my recommendation for planting under those oaks. And it'd be much easier work. So this person needs combo of hardiness zone map and heat zones. They're in Oklahoma because their temperatures range from 0 to 115. Really wrote this down, and you can use the hardiness zone map and look up, plants that, how they, there's a summer hardiness zone, heat zone map, and then the USDA hardiness zone map for cold. So it's two different maps. One's based on summer heat, the other one's based on winter cold. And you do need that in Oklahoma because that range the more range you have in temperatures, the least amount of things you can grow. Obviously soil and rain and those kinds of things have an impact on this, but when I go to San Francisco and go to the San Francisco Botanic Garden or just walk around the city of San Francisco, you'll see tropical plants growing there in a fog forest with temperate plants from all over the world that we grow in our Raleigh, North Carolina garden. You won't see as many necessarily plants that really require super low pH soils. Maybe not that. So it may be some soil related issue that, will prevent them from growing something. But they have this super narrow temperature span that's from 50 to 80 or whatever. And it's like the narrowest, the narrowest temperature range. The narrower that temperature range is, the more things you'll find that you can grow. We're here, this is not true of the year because it gets super, super hot here during the summertime. But if it was anything like the entire few days we're here in this key, I think there's a 7-degree range of difference in temperature, the entire time we're here. San Francisco tends to fit that on almost a year-round basis, this narrow. The further it goes apart from 0 to 115, the more plants you're going to lose. You're losing some for heat, you're losing some for cold. Plus the wind can be an issue too in Oklahoma. But yes, you're definitely in a place where it makes sense to use both the heat map and the cold map. Okay. This person's in the UK. They're in their late 40s and they're starting to think about the future proofing their garden for age. Do we think about this and how would we approach this? This is something I probably should do a video on at some point because yes, it's an issue and we've seen it in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is probably the greatest example of this. The folks who had planted vinca and English ivy and bamboo and some of the other running plants that we see that can really become super invasive in time, even things like winter honeysuckle, lots of other plants that we see in the neighborhood, wisteria, all with good intentions when they were planted, and then the person got older, I think, and then, it was harder to maintain, or they hired a landscaper that really maybe didn't know how to maintain those particular plants. Whatever it was, we've seen the neighborhood just get taken over by some of these plants, bamboo just running wild, and, so yes, and it's really looking at those things. I probably should do a video on this at some point, but it really is, again, at the end of the day, getting the things out that are if you're doing a chart of maintenance that you're doing during the year, those things that are taking up 80% of your time in the garden, which is probably 20% of the task are taking up 80% of your time, the 20% is probably what needs to go from your garden sooner than later as you approach that time where you don't think you're going to be able to maintain them. But it's a great question. It really is a great question. And we've seen it play out live in our neighborhood in Raleigh, North Carolina. So somebody's planning on putting down plant tone and compost. Is this a good idea, and which first? Sure. Adding those organic materials to your garden is a great idea. This first year, I definitely put the plant tone down first because you have the opportunity to get get it down under the compost and not have it, wash away or be as stinky, or have the dogs roll in it and all the other things that the funky, organic fertilizer can bring on to your garden. But definitely getting it covered up, is kind of ideal. I throw it out over the top of everything, on the bag. It tells you to pull mulch back, or you'll see people do that, or put more than I actually apply. I sling the stuff out over the garden and I call it a day. But yeah, having the opportunity to put the fertilizer under the organic material is definitely ideal, especially making sure that none of those nutrients are washing off of your garden. Although the organic fertilizer is less likely to cause harm, it still could wash away. So somebody has rabbit decimating their Mugo pines and the snowball viburnum in zone 5, upper Midwest. They put black pots over them. and a garbage can with holes in it. They're wanting to know if they can leave those on long term through the winter to protect them from the rabbits through the winter. He thinks it should be fine, he or she thinks it should be fine. Another person says it's too hot and could cause damage. You're in zone 5, as long as it's staying super, super cold, those black pots are probably okay. But we tend to use reflective colors for things where we're gonna leave the covers on for a long time. And so you'll see that most of the shade cloth covers are made of cotton. You look it up, if you look at, winter protection blankets on Google, you're gonna see every one of them's white. And they're white for a reason, because they're reflecting that light away, whereas that black is going to introduce heat into that space. I think in the peak of the winter in the upper Midwest, it probably is irrelevant. It's gonna become relevant in February as the days get longer and the sun gets higher in the sky and that kind of thing. Let's see, that was number 18 actually. We were flying through this thing. When we dig out things, I got another truck in front of me. I'll let him back out real quick. Let's see. Okay, when we dig out things like I dug out the Smilax in a video this past week, how do we fill in the holes? I don't, unless it's some sort of really big hole. I kick a bunch of stuff over there and I went on with my day. I actually kicked the stump from a mulberry into that hole and called it a day. So I don't, unless it was a big giant hole. I'm trying not to introduce a lot of foreign soils into our garden space. So number 20 has our Joe Pye weed spread a lot. No, not really. The straight species one we have out by the road that gets 12 feet tall, probably because it's in not quite as much sun as it wants, has seeded itself into a couple spots. But it really hasn't taken off running, and our named dwarf variety in the back garden is totally fine. It has no issue whatsoever. It's kind of stayed in the exact same space. So bigger, better, fuller. Over the 3 years it's been in the ground, but not running off anywhere. So it's, again, a selection was made to try to dwarf it. A lot of different species, but selecting one within a species or crossing 2 species to find one that's more compact, more gardener friendly, not running amok through the garden, that kind of thing. Talked about that earlier in the video. Somebody has Oakland hollies that they planted too close together. Can they dig out every other one now? Can they dig out every other one, and then should they do it now, or when should they do it? Yeah, you can absolutely dig out every other one. They're probably offering each other a little bit of winter protection. I don't know where this actually was for winter wind and that kind of thing. So you might want to, you definitely don't want to do it in the summer, because when you take out every other one, it's going to expose leaves that haven't had sun on them, and they're going to burn like crazy. So you need to do this in the early spring. Late winter is probably ideal. So after the worst of this January, early February winter's over, I'd get it done sooner than later so they don't burn up in the summertime. Last one for this week. Somebody had just said they wanted is there a reference for tree pruning times? Not that I know of, but that's something that Steph and I are going to put together for the weekly garden planner. That's something we're going to be adding in the future, is literally list for each month of things that would be the ideal time to prune them. I prune a lot of things that when it's not the ideal time to do it, but we are going to add that to the weekly garden planner of things, things you would prune after they flower, or things that you would prune, winter prune, summer prune, that kind of thing. So thank you guys so much for following along, asking questions, and we really appreciate it. Again, another great set of questions. The weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series have discounts down below the video, and also, again, the tickets for the open garden are selling pretty quickly, and if you're local, Friday night if you would. Thanks for watching.